It is truly remarkable to me that people from the other side of the world are tuning in and listening to my stories. I can only hope that you find the videos helpful and relaxing. I started this channel because I have trouble sleeping myself. I have worked night shift for the last 20 years, and now I cannot sleep at all whenever I'm not working. I found that green noise helps me a lot. It makes me able to block out everything else and focus my mind. I also noticed, in my quest to find something that could help me sleep, that it is very popular to use history for sleep. And since I also love history, I figured I would combine the two. And now, here we are. I sincerely hope these videos will help you. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like the video. It really helps me out a lot. Now let's carry on. Legendary artifacts. History's most coveted treasures. What if I told you that a single object could change the course of history, incite wars, or even determine the fate of entire empires? For centuries, humanity has been captivated by the idea of legendary artifacts, treasures whispered about in myths and legends, yet often rooted in staggering reality. Just imagine holding something in your hands that has witnessed millennia, been touched by kings and conquerors, and inspired countless legends. From the lost Ark of the Covenant to the mythical Holy Grail, history is filled with treasures so valuable, so impactful, that their very existence shaped human destiny. Prepare to delve into the captivating narratives and incredible power behind these fabled artifacts. Join us as we unearth the true stories behind history's most coveted and powerful relics. Unearthing the obsession. There exists, within the human heart, a profound and ancient longing, a deep-seated desire that transcends culture, time, and geography. It is the yearning for something beyond the ordinary, something that connects us to forces greater than ourselves. Throughout the ages, this longing has manifested in our fascination with objects of extraordinary power and beauty, with artifacts that seem to hold within them the very essence of human ambition and divine mystery. Consider for a moment the nature of this obsession. Why have civilizations across the world, separated by vast oceans and centuries of time, all gravitated toward the belief that certain objects possess capabilities beyond the physical realm? The answer lies deep within our collective consciousness, in that part of us that refuses to accept the limitations of mortal existence. We seek power, not merely for dominance, but for the ability to shape our destinies. We crave knowledge, not just for understanding, but for glimpsing the secrets that lie beyond the veil of ordinary perception. We desire beauty, not simply for aesthetic pleasure, but because it offers us a taste of the eternal, the unchanging, the perfect. And perhaps most profoundly, we hunger for immortality, for some way to transcend the inevitable decay that awaits all living things. In legendary artifacts, these desires find their ultimate expression. These objects become vessels for our deepest hopes and fears, repositories of meaning that far exceed their material composition. The Spear of Destiny stands as one such object, wrapped in layers of legend and historical intrigue. Also known as the Holy Lance, or the Spear of Longinus. This artifact supposedly pierced the side of Jesus Christ during the crucifixion, forever marking it as an instrument of divine interaction with human suffering. According to legend, whoever possesses this spear holds the fate of the world in their hands. Emperors and conquerors throughout history have believed this, from Constantine the Great to Charlemagne, from Frederick Barbarossa to Adolf Hitler himself, who, according to accounts, was obsessed with obtaining the spear from the Vienna Museum, where it was housed. The spear represents more than mere superstition. It embodies the human belief that certain objects can serve as conduits between the mortal and the divine, between the world we know and the realm of ultimate power. Whether the legends surrounding the spear are true matters, less than what they reveal about our collective psyche. We want to believe that such objects exist, that somewhere in the world there are treasures that can elevate us beyond our ordinary limitations. The Holy Grail represents another dimension of this obsession, perhaps the most romantic and enduring of all legendary artifacts. Unlike the Spear of Destiny, which speaks to power and conquest, the Grail speaks to spiritual fulfillment, to healing, to the quest for ultimate truth. In medieval legend, the Grail was the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, and later used to catch his blood at the crucifixion. Knights of King Arthur's Round Table spent lifetimes searching for this sacred vessel, believing that finding it would bring spiritual redemption and physical healing to a wounded land. The Grail stories are rich with symbolism. The quest itself becomes more important than the destination. Those who seek the Grail must be pure of heart, must overcome trials both physical and spiritual. The Grail chooses its keeper, not the other way around. In this way, the legend of the Grail reflects our understanding that the most valuable treasures are not those we can simply take by force, but those we must earn through transformation of the self. These legendary objects captivated civilizations precisely because they offered something beyond wealth or material gain. They promised transformation, transcendence, connection to the divine. In a world where life was often brutal and short, where disease and warfare claimed countless lives, the idea that a single object might offer protection, power, or even immortality held immense psychological and cultural value. Even when these artifacts existed only in legend, never materializing in physical form, they still shaped history. The quest for the Holy Grail inspired centuries of literature, art, and spiritual seeking. The belief in the Spear of Destiny influenced the decisions of rulers and the movements of armies. In this sense, the power of legendary artifacts lies not necessarily in their physical existence, but in their ability to move human hearts and minds, to inspire action, to give meaning to struggle and sacrifice. Throughout history, humans have imbued objects with significance far beyond their physical properties. A crown is just metal and jewels, yet it represents sovereignty and legitimacy. A flag is just fabric and dye, yet people die defending it. A religious relic is just bone or wood, yet millions travel vast distances to be in its presence. We are meaning-making creatures, and we pour that meaning into objects, transforming them into something more than the sum of their material parts. This impulse runs deep in our nature. Archaeological evidence shows that even our earliest ancestors created and valued special objects. Prehistoric peoples carved figurines, crafted elaborate jewelry, and buried their dead with precious goods. They recognized that objects could carry meaning, could serve as bridges between the mundane and the sacred, between the living and the dead, between the present moment and eternity. As civilizations grew more complex, so did the artifacts they created and treasured. Ancient Egypt filled tombs with elaborate goods meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. The treasures of Tutankhamun, discovered nearly intact in the 20th century, revealed the staggering wealth and artistry devoted to ensuring a pharaoh's comfort in the next world. Gold, lapis lazuli, alabaster, ivory, all fashioned into objects of extraordinary beauty and sophistication. In ancient Mesopotamia, cylinder seals served as both practical tools and symbolic objects. Rolled across clay, they left impressions identifying ownership and authority. But they were also miniature works of art, carved with exquisite detail, depicting gods and heroes, myths and rituals. To possess such a seal was to possess a piece of divine order, to participate in the cosmic drama depicted on its surface. The ancient Greeks created cult statues of such beauty and grandeur that they were counted among the wonders of the world. The statue of Zeus at Olympia, crafted by the sculptor Phidias, was said to be so magnificent that merely viewing it was a religious experience. The statue stood over 40 feet tall, made of ivory and gold, depicting the king of the gods seated on an elaborate throne. Though it was destroyed in late antiquity, ancient descriptions convey the awe it inspired in those who beheld it. The Romans inherited and expanded upon these traditions, filling their cities with statuary and monuments, their homes with mosaics and frescoes, their temples with precious objects. When they conquered new territories, they brought back not only gold and slaves, but also sacred objects from defeated peoples. The triumph, The ceremonial parade celebrating a military victory included displaying captured treasures, demonstrating Rome's dominance over foreign gods and kings. In China, jade occupied a place of supreme importance, valued even above gold. The Chinese believed jade possessed mystical properties, that it could preserve the body after death, that it embodied virtue and purity. Jade burial suits, consisting of thousands of jade pieces sewn together with gold or silver wire, were created for royalty, in the belief that jade's incorruptibility would transfer to the body it encased. The Imperial Seal, carved from jade, represented the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule. In the Americas, civilizations like the Maya, Aztec, and Inca created their own treasured objects. The Aztecs valued jade, turquoise, and especially the feathers of the quetzal bird, which were woven into elaborate headdresses and capes for nobility. Gold was valued not primarily for its rarity, but for its color, which reminded them of the sun. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, they were astounded by the quantities of gold in Mexico and Peru, melting down exquisite works of art into bars for easier transport, destroying in the process priceless examples of indigenous artistry. These examples from diverse cultures and eras reveal a universal human truth. We need objects that embody our values, our beliefs, our aspirations. We need treasures that connect us to powers beyond ourselves, whether those powers are divine, ancestral, or natural. We need artifacts that tell our stories, that mark our achievements, that serve as anchors for memory and meaning in the flowing stream of time. The legendary artifacts we will explore in this journey share these qualities. They are objects that have captured human imagination across generations, that have been sought, fought over, studied, and treasured. Some exist in the realm of myth and legend, their physical reality uncertain or lost. Others are tangible objects residing in museums, their presence indisputable, yet their stories layered with mystery and debate. All of them reveal something essential about human nature, about what we value and why, about how we relate to the past and imagine the future. As we settle into this exploration, let your mind wander through the corridors of time, imagining the hands that have touched these objects, the eyes that have gazed upon them in wonder or greed, the hearts that have yearned for them across centuries and continents. Each artifact we will encounter has its own story to tell, its own lessons to teach about power and beauty, knowledge and mystery, loss and preservation. Tales of power and conquest. Now we turn our attention to artifacts that exist beyond legend, objects whose physical presence has been documented, fought over, and treasured by successive generations of rulers and nations. These are artifacts whose stories are written not only in myth, but in blood, in treaties, in the rise and fall of empires. They remind us that the human desire for precious objects is not merely abstract or spiritual, but has concrete, sometimes terrible consequences. The Koh-i-Noor diamond rests today in the Tower of London, set into the crown of the Queen Mother. But its journey to that resting place is paved with centuries of violence, betrayal, and conquest. The name Koh-i-Noor means mountain of light in Persian, and this extraordinary gem, weighing over 105 carats in its current form, has been described as having a curse attached to it, specifically that it brings misfortune to any male ruler who possesses it, while bringing good fortune to female ruler. The earliest reliable records of the Koh-i-Noor place it in the possession of various Mughal emperors, though legends trace its origins back thousands of years, claiming it was mentioned in ancient Sanskrit texts. What we know with certainty is that this diamond has passed through the hands of Persian Shahs, Afghan emirs, Sikh Maharajas, and finally the British Crown, and almost every transfer of ownership involved warfare, assassination, or forced surrender. In the early 18th century, the diamond belonged to the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. When the Persian ruler Nader Shah invaded India in 1739, he heard tales of this legendary diamond and became determined to possess it. After defeating Muhammad Shah and sacking Delhi, Nader Shah discovered that the Mughal emperor had hidden the diamond in his turban. Learning of this, Nader Shah invited Muhammad Shah to a feast and suggested they exchange turbans as a gesture of eternal friendship, a custom that could not be refused without grave insult. When Nader Shah later unwound the turban in private and the enormous diamond tumbled out, he reportedly exclaimed Koh-i-Noor, and thus the diamond received the name by which it is known today. But Nader Shah's possession of the diamond was short-lived. He was assassinated by his own guards in 1747, and the diamond passed to one of his generals, Ahmad Shah Durrani, who founded the Durrani Empire in Afghanistan. The diamond remained in Afghan possession for several decades, passing through various rulers, each succession marked by violence and political intrigue. In 1813, Shah Shuja Durrani, fleeing from his enemies, took refuge in Lahore with Mahara Ranjit Singh, the powerful Sikh ruler. Ranjit Singh offered protection, but at a price. He demanded the Koh-i-Noor. Shah Shuja initially refused, claiming he no longer possessed it, but after weeks of diplomatic pressure and thinly veiled threats, he finally surrendered the diamond to the Sikh ruler. Ranjit Singh treasured the diamond above all his possessions, wearing it on ceremonial occasions and keeping it in a specially constructed vault. When Ranjit Singh died in 1839, the Sikh Empire began to fragment. Political instability and succession disputes weakened the once mighty kingdom. The British East India Company, ever watchful for opportunities to expand its control over the Indian subcontinent, saw its chance. After two brutal Anglo-Sikh wars, the British emerged victorious. In the Treaty of Lahore of 1849, among the terms of surrender, the British demanded that the Koh-i-Noor be surrendered to Queen Victoria. The young Maharajah Duleep Singh, only 10 years old, was forced to present the diamond to the British Governor-General. The diamond was then shipped to England and presented to Queen Victoria in 1850. The Queen was reportedly disappointed by the diamond's appearance, finding it less brilliant than expected. Prince Albert arranged to have it recut in 1852, reducing its weight from 186 carats to 105 carats, but significantly increasing its brilliance and fire. The Koh-i-Noor has remained in British possession ever since, despite repeated requests from India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan for its return. Each nation claims historical ownership, and the diamond has become a symbol not just of beauty and wealth, but of colonial appropriation and the complex legacies of empire. The British government's position has been that the diamond was obtained legally through the Treaty of Lahore, though critics point out that treaties signed under duress with a child ruler of a defeated nation hardly constitute ethical acquisition. The story of the Koh-i-Noor reminds us that objects of great beauty and value are rarely innocent. They carry with them the weight of history, the suffering of those who fought for them, the greed of those who coveted them, and the complex moral questions about ownership, legitimacy, and cultural heritage. When we gaze upon such an object in a museum case, we are looking not merely at carbon crystallized under immense pressure deep within the earth, but as a physical embodiment of human desire, violence, and the exercises of power across centuries. The diamond itself is silent, reflecting light with indifferent beauty, but the stories woven around it speak volumes about the human condition. Each facet catches the light differently, and perhaps we can imagine each facet representing a different moment in the diamond's long history, a different pair of hands that held it, a different eye that coveted it, a different heart that schemed to possess it. Let us now shift our gaze to an artifact of a very different nature, one that unlocked not kingdoms, but understanding itself. The Rosetta Stone sits in the British Museum in London, a dark, granodiorite stele covered with inscriptions in 3 different scripts. To the casual observer, it might seem less spectacular than a glittering diamond, yet its discovery and decipherment represent one of the greatest intellectual achievements in human history, opening a door that had been closed for over 1,000 years. Before the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, the ancient Egyptian language was utterly lost to humanity. The hieroglyphs that covered temple walls, tombs, and monuments throughout Egypt were beautiful, mysterious, and completely incomprehensible. Scholars could admire the artistry of ancient Egypt, could study its architecture and artifacts, but the voices of the ancient Egyptians themselves remained silent. their thoughts and beliefs locked away in an undecipherable script. The stone was discovered in 1799 by French soldiers who were part of Napoleon's campaign in Egypt. They were working to strengthen the defenses of Fort Julian near the town of Rashid, known to Europeans as Rosetta, when they unearthed the stone. A French officer named Pierre-François Bouchard recognized its potential importance, particularly because the inscriptions appeared in 3 different scripts: hieroglyphic at the top, Demotic in the middle, and Ancient Greek at the bottom. The Greek inscription could be read, and scholars quickly realized that all 3 inscriptions contained the same text. A decree issued in 196 BCE during the reign of Ptolemy V. This meant that the stone provided the key to understanding hieroglyphs. If only someone could work out the relationship between the known Greek text and the unknown hieroglyphic script. However, before French scholars could fully study the stone, the British defeated the French forces in Egypt. Under the terms of the Treaty of Alexandria in 1801, the French were forced to surrender the Rosetta Stone and other antiquities to the British. The stone was shipped to England and placed in the British Museum, where it remains to this day, another artifact whose ownership reflects the imperial competitions of the era. The race to decipher the hieroglyphs captured the imagination of scholars across Europe. The brilliant English polymath Thomas Young made significant progress, recognizing that some hieroglyphs were phonetic, representing sounds rather than just pictures. But it was Jean-François Champollion, a French scholar of extraordinary linguistic gifts, who achieved the breakthrough. Champollion had been obsessed with ancient Egypt since childhood. He had mastered numerous ancient languages, and he brought to the problem not just linguistic knowledge, but intuitive genius. In 1822, after years of intensive study, Champollion experienced his moment of revelation. He realized that hieroglyphs combined both phonetic and ideographic elements, that they could represent both sounds and concepts, and that the script had evolved over thousands of years. When he finally deciphered the cartouches containing the names of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, confirming his theories, he rushed to his brother's office, shouted "Je tiens l'affaire," which means "I've got it," and then collapsed from the excitement and exhaustion. He remained unconscious for 5 days. Champollion's achievement opened up an entire civilization to modern understanding. Suddenly, the voices of ancient Egypt could be heard again. The religious texts inscribed in tombs, the administrative records, the love poems, the medical texts, the historical accounts, all became readable. The Rosetta Stone had served as the key that unlocked 3,000 years of silence. The cultural and historical significance of this cannot be overstated. The decipherment of hieroglyphs transformed our understanding of human history. We learned about the beliefs, the daily life, the political structures, the scientific knowledge of one of humanity's greatest civilizations. We discovered that ancient Egyptians performed surgery, wrote sophisticated literature, developed complex theological systems, and created bureaucratic structures of remarkable sophistication. We learned about their gods and goddesses, about Osiris and Isis, Ra and Horus, about the journey of the soul through the underworld and the weighing of the heart against the feather of truth. We learned about pharaohs whose names have been lost to history, about military campaigns and diplomatic marriages, about monuments raised and cities built. We learned about ordinary people, too, their complaints and jokes, their business dealings and family squabbles, preserved in letters and documents that survived in the dry Egyptian climate. The Rosetta Stone demonstrates that artifacts can possess power, not through material value or association with supernatural forces, but through what they enable us to understand. Knowledge itself is a form of treasure, perhaps the most valuable treasure of all. The stone is a bridge across time, connecting our world to one that had been lost, allowing the dead to speak to the living across a gulf of millennia. When we stand before the Rosetta Stone in the British Museum, we are looking at more than inscribed rock. We are looking at the moment when a lost civilization was reborn in human consciousness, when texts that had been silent for over 1,000 years began to speak again. The stone itself is unaware of its significance, but to us, it represents the triumph of human curiosity and intellect, the determination to recover what was lost, to understand what was forgotten. From Egypt, let us journey east to China, to consider an artifact that embodies political legitimacy itself. The Imperial Seal of China, known as the heirloom seal of the realm, was carved from the precious jade stone known as the Heshibi in 221 BCE, when Qin Shi Huang unified China and established himself as the first emperor of a united Chinese state. The seal bore the inscription having received the mandate from heaven, "May the emperor lead a long and prosperous life." This was no mere decorative object. In Chinese political philosophy, the emperor ruled through the mandate of heaven, a divine approval that could be granted or withdrawn based on the emperor's virtue and effectiveness. The imperial seal was the physical embodiment of this mandate. To possess the seal was to possess legitimacy itself. For over 1,000 years, the seal passed from dynasty to dynasty, sometimes peacefully, often violently. When a dynasty fell and a new one rose, possession of the seal confirmed that the mandate of heaven had transferred to the new rulers. Without the seal, a new emperor's claim to legitimacy was questionable, no matter how many armies he commanded or how many territories he controlled. The history of the seal is tumultuous. It survived fires, wars, palace intrigues, and numerous attempts at theft. In the chaos following the fall of the Qin dynasty, the seal passed to the Han dynasty. Centuries later, during a period of upheaval, a palace woman threw the seal at an official, chipping one corner. The seal was repaired with gold, and this imperfection actually became part of its authenticity, proof that this was the original seal and not a replica. The seal disappeared and reappeared multiple times throughout Chinese history. It was lost when the Tang dynasty fell, found again, lost again during the chaos of the Five Dynasties period. It passed through the hands of the Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties. Each time a new dynasty came to power, confirming possession of the seal was a crucial priority, announced to the entire empire as proof of legitimate succession. The last certain record of the seal dates to the end of the Yuan dynasty in the 14th century. When the Ming dynasty came to power, they could not find the seal, despite extensive searches. The last Mongol emperor may have taken it with him when he fled, or it may have been lost during the turbulent transition between dynasties. Without the seal, the Ming emperors had to establish their legitimacy through other means, through military success, effective governance, and historical records. Subsequent dynasties, including the Qing, never possessed the original imperial seal. They created their own seals, claiming they held the mandate of heaven through their achievements and the will of the people. But the absence of the original seal remained a source of incompleteness, a missing piece of the legitimacy puzzle. The fate of the original imperial seal remains one of China's great historical mysteries. It may lie buried somewhere, hidden in a forgotten tomb or lost in a battlefield. It may have been destroyed intentionally by those who wanted to deny legitimacy to their successors. It may rest in a private collection, its true identity unknown even to its possessor. The mystery endures, and with it, the questions the seal raises about authority, legitimacy, and the symbols we use to represent abstract concepts. The significance of the imperial seal extends beyond Chinese history. It represents the human need for symbols of authority, for physical objects that can embody abstract concepts like legitimacy, sovereignty, and divine approval. Across cultures and throughout history, rulers have understood that power requires not just force but acceptance, and that certain objects can help bridge the gap between raw power and accepted authority. Crowns serve this function in many monarchies. The British crown jewels, guarded in the Tower of London, are essential to the coronation ceremony. Without the crown placed upon the monarch's head, the ritual feels incomplete, the transfer of sovereignty somehow not fully realized. Scepters and orbs, thrones and staffs, all serve similar purposes, making abstract authority concrete and visible. In ancient Rome, the fasces, a bundle of rods bound around an axe, symbolized magisterial authority. Lictors carried these before Roman magistrates, announcing their approach and representing their power to punish. The symbol was so powerful that it survived into modern times, adopted by various governments and appearing even today in official emblems and seals. In many cultures, sacred texts serve as objects of authority. The Torah scrolls in Jewish tradition, handwritten on parchment and kept in elaborately decorated arks, are treated with profound reverence. To damage or destroy such a scroll is considered a terrible act. Similarly, the Quran is treated with special reverence in Islamic tradition, positioned in the highest places in a room, never placed beneath other books. These examples illustrate how humans invest objects with meanings that transcend their physical nature. A jade seal is just carved stone. A crown is just metal and gems. A scroll is just ink on parchment. But through cultural agreement and historical tradition, these objects become something more: carriers of authority and legitimacy, vessels of collective meaning. As we contemplate these artifacts of power and conquest, the diamond that passed through blood-stained hands, the stone that unlocked a lost language, the seal that embodied political legitimacy, we begin to understand that these objects are more than curiosities from the past. They are mirrors reflecting human nature itself: our hunger for power, our thirst for knowledge, our need for order and meaning. They show us what we value, what we fight for, what we preserve through generations. They connect us to those who came before, reminding us that the desires that drove ancient emperors and medieval knights continued to pulse through our modern hearts. In the quiet flow of these stories, let your mind rest gently on the images we have explored. The Koh-i-Noor catching the light, each facet a window into a different moment of history. The Rosetta Stone with its 3 scripts, the key that opened a lost world. The Imperial Seal, wherever it may rest now, still holding its secrets, still embodying the idea that legitimacy requires more than mere force. These artifacts endure in memory and meaning, even when their physical forms are lost or contested, and they continue to teach us about ourselves and our endless fascination with objects that carry history within them. The curse and the controversy. There is something deeply compelling about the idea of a cursed object, an artifact that brings not fortune, but misfortune to those who possess it. The concept appears across cultures and throughout history, suggesting a universal human intuition that some objects carry with them more than physical properties, that they can be imbued with dark intentions or supernatural consequences. Perhaps no archaeological discovery has been more thoroughly associated with the idea of a curse than the tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh who ruled Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. The discovery of his tomb in the Valley of the Kings in 1922 by Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon created a sensation that reverberated around the world. Here was an almost intact royal tomb filled with golden treasures beyond imagination. The mummified body of the young king resting in nested golden coffins within a stone sarcophagus. But alongside the wonder came whispers of a curse. When Lord Carnarvon died, just 5 months after the tomb was opened, the press seized upon the idea that ancient Egyptian priests had placed a curse on the tomb to protect it from violators. The story grew with each retelling. It was claimed that a tablet had been found at the entrance bearing an inscription warning that death would come on swift wings to anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. No such tablet ever existed, but the story was too compelling to be constrained by mere facts. As the years passed, other deaths among those connected with the tomb's excavation were attributed to the curse. A radiologist who x-rayed the mummy died shortly afterward. An American archaeologist who visited the tomb died the following year. Lord Carnarvon's half-brother died suddenly. A Egyptologist who had helped catalog the tomb's contents died of a stroke. Each death was added to the tally, creating the impression of an implacable supernatural vengeance. The reality, of course, was far more mundane. Lord Carnarvon was already in poor health when he traveled to Egypt. He had suffered a serious car accident years earlier and never fully recovered. He died from an infected mosquito bite that developed into pneumonia, not an uncommon fate in an era before antibiotics. The radiologist who x-rayed the mummy was already 70 and died of natural causes. The American archaeologist died from a condition unrelated to his work in Egypt. Statistical analysis shows that those present at the tomb's opening actually lived longer on average than would be expected for their demographic group. Howard Carter himself, the man who spent more time in the tomb than anyone else, who breathed its air and handled its contents for years, lived until 1939, dying peacefully at age 64. If there had been a curse, surely its primary target would have been the man who actually disturbed the mummy. Yet he lived 17 years after the tomb's discovery, healthy and productive until his final illness. The persistence of the curse narrative tells us something important about human psychology. We are pattern-seeking creatures, prone to seeing connections even where none exist. When someone associated with a famous archaeological discovery dies, we notice and remember. When someone from the general population dies, we pay no attention. This creates a false impression of unusual mortality among those connected with the tomb. Moreover, the curse narrative served various purposes. For journalists, it sold newspapers. For those uncomfortable with the appropriation of Egyptian artifacts by Western powers, it provided a form of poetic justice, a suggestion that the ancient Egyptians could still defend their treasures from beyond the grave. For the public, it added mystery and danger to an already fascinating discovery, transforming archaeology from a dry academic pursuit into an adventure story with supernatural elements. Yet, there may be a kernel of truth buried within the superstition. Modern studies have shown that ancient tombs can harbor dangerous pathogens, fungi, and bacteria that have survived for millennia in the sealed environment. When such tombs are opened, these organisms can become airborne. In an era before modern safety protocols and antibiotics, exposure to such pathogens could indeed prove dangerous. So while there was no supernatural curse, there may have been genuine health risks that lent credibility to the curse narrative. The story of Tutankhamun's curse reminds us that myths often arise to explain or make sense of events that trouble or fascinate us. The idea that ancient priests could reach across thousands of years to punish those who violated sacred spaces speaks to our sense that some boundaries should not be crossed, that some places should remain undisturbed, that the dead deserve respect even when they lived in ages almost unimaginably remote from our own. The tomb itself, with its golden treasures and preserved artifacts, offers us a window into ancient Egyptian beliefs about death and the afterlife. The young pharaoh was surrounded by everything he might need in the next world: furniture, clothing, jewelry, weapons, chariots, food, wine. The walls of the burial chamber were painted with scenes depicting his journey through the underworld. The canopic jars held his preserved organs. Every detail was carefully arranged according to religious tradition, creating a complete world within the tomb. Among the treasures was Tutankhamun's famous golden death mask, one of the most recognizable artifacts in the world. Made of solid gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, carnelian, and colored glass, it shows the young king's idealized features, serene and eternal. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, every detail perfect, from the delicate inlay work to the royal regalia. Looking upon this mask, we see not just gold and jewels, but the face of someone who lived over 3,000 years ago, someone who was once young and alive, who ruled an empire and died mysteriously in his late teens. The treasures from Tutankhamun's tomb toured the world in the 20th century, drawing millions of visitors who waited hours to glimpse these ancient wonders. The exhibition demonstrated the enduring power of ancient Egyptian civilization to captivate modern imagination. People who might never visit Egypt could encounter these objects, could feel some connection to that ancient world, could contemplate mortality and immortality, art and belief, across the vast gulf of time. From cursed tombs, let us turn to a different kind of controversy, one that continues to provoke passionate debate in our own time. The Elgin Marbles, also known as the Parthenon sculptures, stand at the center of one of the most contentious disputes in the art world, raising profound questions about cultural ownership, colonial legacy, and the proper role of museums in the 21st century. These magnificent marble sculptures once adorned the Parthenon, the temple dedicated to Athena, that crowns the Acropolis in Athens. Created in the 5th century BCE, under the direction of the sculptor Phidias, they represent the pinnacle of classical Greek art. The sculptures depicted scenes from Greek mythology, including the birth of Athena, the battle between the Olympian gods and the giants, and the Panathenaic procession, the great festival held every 4 years in honor of Athena. For over 2,000 years, these sculptures remain part of the Parthenon, weathering the transformation of Athens from independent city-state to Roman province to Byzantine stronghold to Ottoman territory. The Parthenon itself was converted from a temple to Athena into a Christian church and later into a mosque. In 1687, during a war between Venice and the Ottoman Empire, the Parthenon suffered catastrophic damage when Venetian artillery ignited Ottoman gunpowder stored inside the building. It caused a massive explosion that destroyed much of the structure and damaged many of the sculptures. Into this situation came Thomas Bruce, the 7th Earl of Elgin, who arrived in Constantinople in 1899 as British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. Elgin was passionate about classical art and obtained permission from the Ottoman authorities, who then controlled Greece, to make casts and drawings of the Parthenon sculptures. The exact nature and extent of his permission remains disputed to this day. Between 1801 and 1812, Elgin's agents removed approximately half of the surviving sculptures from the Parthenon, along with architectural elements and inscriptions. These were shipped to Britain, a process fraught with difficulty. One ship sank and had to be salvaged. The costs were enormous, and Elgin eventually faced financial ruin. In 1816, deeply in debt, he sold the entire collection to the British government, which placed them in the British Museum, where they remain today. From the very beginning, Elgin's actions were controversial. Lord Byron, the famous poet who loved Greece and eventually died fighting for Greek independence, wrote scathingly of Elgin's removal of the marbles, calling him a vandal who had defaced the Parthenon. Byron's poem, The Curse of Minerva, imagined the goddess Athena pronouncing judgment on Elgin for his desecration of her temple. The controversy has only intensified over time. Greece has repeatedly requested the return of the marbles, arguing that they are an integral part of Greek cultural heritage, that they were removed during a period of foreign occupation when Greece had no voice in the matter, and that they belong in Athens, in sight of the Parthenon from which they were taken. The Greek government has built a state-of-the-art Acropolis museum with a gallery specifically designed to house the Parthenon sculptures, with windows offering views of the Parthenon itself, making a powerful symbolic statement about where these works should reside. The British Museum and the British government have resisted these requests, arguing that Elgin acted with proper legal authority from the government that controlled Greece at the time, that the museum has preserved the marbles better than they would have been preserved if left in Athens exposed to pollution and weathering, and that the British Museum serves as a universal museum where artifacts from all cultures can be studied together, fostering cross-cultural understanding. Each argument deserves consideration. It is true that Elgin obtained permission from the Ottoman authorities, though the exact scope of that permission is unclear, and the original document has been lost. It is also true that the marbles in London have been protected from the environmental damage that has affected those remaining in Athens, though Greece would argue that this actually strengthens their case for return, since they now have the proper facilities to preserve them. The broader question concerns cultural ownership in a post-colonial world. Many of the world's greatest museums were built on collections assembled during the Age of Empire, when powerful European nations extracted artifacts from colonized territories. The British Museum, the Louvre, the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, all face similar questions about the provenance of their collections and the ethics of retaining objects that were acquired under colonial circumstances. Some argue that these universal museums serve an important function, allowing people from all backgrounds to encounter diverse cultural achievements, fostering appreciation and understanding across cultural boundaries. A person who might never be able to travel to Greece can encounter the Parthenon sculptures in London. A person who might never visit Egypt can see the Rosetta Stone. These encounters, the argument goes, enrich humanity as a whole. Others counter that this argument implicitly privileges Western institutions, and Western audiences, assuming that the proper place for global cultural treasures is in European and American museums. They point out that technology now allows for perfect replicas that could serve educational purposes, while the originals return to their places of origin. They argue that cultural heritage belongs to the cultures that created it, and that the ability of Greeks to encounter their own heritage in its proper context matters more than the convenience of tourists in London. The debate over the Elgin Marbles encapsulates larger questions about globalization, cultural identity, historical justice, and the legacy of colonialism. There are no easy answers, only competing values and perspectives, each with its own validity. What seems clear is that the 19th century assumption that Western institutions were the natural custodians of world culture no longer commands universal assent. The conversation has shifted, and museums must grapple with difficult ethical questions about their collections and their role in a more interconnected yet culturally self-aware world. The marbles themselves are silent witnesses to this debate, their carved figures frozen in eternal motion, depicting gods and heroes, mortals and monsters, in scenes of celebration and combat. The artistry is breathtaking. The sculptor understood human anatomy perfectly, rendering muscle and bone, the drape of fabric, the expressions of faces with stunning realism. Yet there is also idealization, a perfection that transcends mere naturalism, that speaks to classical ideals of beauty, harmony, and proportion. To stand before these sculptures, whether in London or Athens, is to encounter one of humanity's great artistic achievements. The question is not whether they are valuable or beautiful, but where they belong, who has the right to decide, and what principles should guide such decisions in an age where the legacies of empire and colonialism are being examined and debated with new urgency. Let us now consider another lost treasure, one that vanished in the chaos of World War II and has never been recovered, despite decades of searching. The Amber Room was one of the most spectacular interior spaces ever created, an entire room whose walls were covered with elaborately carved panels of amber, backed with gold leaf and mirrors, creating an effect of extraordinary warmth and luminosity. The room was originally constructed in Prussia in the early 18th century for Frederick I. In 1716, it was given by his son, Frederick William I, to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia, cementing an alliance between Prussia and Russia. The amber panels were shipped to Russia and installed in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, and later moved to the Catherine Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, near St. Petersburg, where they were expanded to cover a much larger room. For over 2 centuries, the Amber Room dazzled visitors to the Catherine Palace. The panels contained approximately 6 tons of amber, supplemented with precious stones and intricate carved decorations. The amber, ranging in color from pale honey to deep cognac, created a glowing, almost living presence. Contemporary accounts described the effect as magical, particularly when the room was lit by candles, which caused the amber to seem to glow from within. Amber is fossilized tree resin, hardened over millions of years. It can contain perfectly preserved insects, plant matter, even occasionally small vertebrates, trapped in the sticky resin before it fossilized. This connection to deep time, to ancient forests and extinct species, adds another layer of fascination to amber as a material. It is both beautiful and scientific, decorative and informative, precious and primordial. When Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, special units were tasked with seizing art treasures from museums, palaces, and private collections. The Amber Room was high on their list of priorities. In September 1941, German troops reached the Catherine Palace. Soviet curators had attempted to protect the Amber Room by covering the panels with wallpaper, hoping the Germans would not recognize what lay beneath. The ruse failed. The Germans recognized the value of what they had found, and despite the fragility of amber, which becomes brittle with age, they carefully dismantled the panels over 36 hours and packed them into 27 crates. The Amber Room was shipped to Königsberg in East Prussia, modern-day Kaliningrad, where it was reassembled and put on display in the city's castle. It remained there until 1944, when Allied bombing campaigns began to threaten German cities. Castle was damaged by British bombers in August 1944, and the Amber Room was reportedly dismantled again and hidden for safekeeping. In April 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Königsberg, the city was subjected to intense bombardment. The castle was severely damaged and parts of it burned. After the Soviet victory, the castle ruins were searched, but no trace of the Amber Room was found. Since then, the fate of the Amber Room has remained one of the great mysteries of the art world. Numerous theories have been proposed. Some believe it was destroyed in the fires that consumed parts of Königsberg during the final Soviet assault. Others think it was hidden in underground tunnels or bunkers beneath the city, waiting to be rediscovered. Some theories place it in abandoned mines in Thuringia or Saxony. Still others suggest it was loaded onto a ship that was sunk in the Baltic Sea, or that it was secretly transported to some other location and remains hidden in a private collection. Over the decades, treasure hunters, historians, and journalists have pursued countless leads, excavated numerous sites, and followed elaborate chains of clues and rumors. In the 1990s, fragments of the original Amber Room began to surface, including a mosaic panel that had been stolen by a German soldier and kept by his family. These fragments confirmed that at least parts of the Amber Room survived the war, but the fate of the main panels remains unknown. In the 1990s, the Russian government decided to create a reconstruction of the Amber Room in the Catherine Palace. Using old photographs, drawings, and the few surviving original fragments, along with traditional amber working techniques that had to be relearned, Russian craftsmen spent 24 years painstakingly recreating the room. The reconstructed Amber Room was unveiled in 2003 on the tercentenary of St. Petersburg's founding. While it may not be the original, it allows modern visitors to experience something of the wonder that 18th century visitors felt. The story of the Amber Room speaks to the vulnerability of cultural treasures during times of war and upheaval. So much of humanity's artistic and cultural heritage has been destroyed, lost, or scattered by conflict. Each generation must decide what it values enough to preserve and protect, even in the face of violence and chaos. The fact that Russia chose to invest years and significant resources in reconstructing the Amber Room demonstrates the importance of cultural memory, the desire to reclaim what was lost, even if only in replica form. The lost Amber Room also reminds us that some treasures may be gone forever, that not all mysteries can be solved, not all losses recovered. There is a melancholy in this, but also perhaps a lesson about impermanence and the need to appreciate and protect what we have while we still have it. The original panels may lie buried somewhere, may have been destroyed, may be waiting in some forgotten storage room for rediscovery. Until they are found, if they ever are, they exist in a liminal space between memory and oblivion, present in photographs and descriptions, but absent from physical reality. War has destroyed countless treasures throughout history. The Library of Alexandria, one of the ancient world's greatest repositories of knowledge, was destroyed in various stages through fires and conquests. The exact contents are unknown, but ancient sources suggest it contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, texts from across the known world, works of literature, science, philosophy, and history, many of which existed nowhere else. What knowledge was lost when those scrolls burned? What insights and achievements vanished? We will never know. During World War II, bombing raids destroyed artworks, libraries, and monuments across Europe. The Dresden Frauenkirche, a Baroque masterpiece, was reduced to rubble by firebombing. It has since been reconstructed, but the original stones lay scattered for decades, a memorial to destruction. In Asia, Japanese cities saw ancient temples and cultural sites destroyed. In the Chinese city of Nanjing, in addition to the horrific human toll, countless cultural treasures were destroyed or looted. More recently, the Taliban's destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan in 2001 shocked the world. These massive statues, carved into a cliff face in the 6th century, had stood for over 1,400 years, surviving weather, earthquakes, and previous conflicts. They were destroyed deliberately, dynamited because they represented a religious tradition the Taliban rejected. The empty niches where the Buddhas stood remain as haunting absences, testaments to cultural vandalism. In Iraq and Syria, conflict has led to widespread looting and destruction of archaeological sites. The ancient city of Palmyra saw its temples dynamited by ISIS militants. Nimrud and Hatra, ancient Assyrian cities, suffered similar fates. Museums were looted, artifacts destroyed or sold on the black market to fund conflict. The loss is incalculable, not just of valuable objects, but of the knowledge they contained, the stories they could tell about ancient civilizations. As we reflect on these artifacts surrounded by curse and controversy, by loss and disputed ownership, we come to understand that the stories we tell about objects are as important as the objects themselves. The Elgin Marbles raise questions about justice and cultural heritage that each generation must answer for itself. The Amber Room reminds us of what can be lost when civilization breaks down into violence. And the curse of Tutankhamun reveals our need for meaning and mystery, our desire to believe that the past can still reach out and touch us, even across the vast gulf of centuries. These controversies and mysteries add layers of meaning to the artifacts. They are not just things but focal points for debates about values, about what matters and why, about how we should relate to the past and to each other. They force us to grapple with difficult questions that have no simple answers, and in that grappling, we define ourselves and our societies. Beyond the gold, intrinsic value. Not all legendary artifacts gleam with precious metals or dazzle with gemstones. Some of the most significant objects in human history are valuable not for their material composition, but for what they tell us about human ingenuity, knowledge, and achievement. These are artifacts that challenge our assumptions about the past, that reveal capabilities we did not know ancient peoples possessed, that open windows into worlds we thought lost forever. In the spring of 1901, divers searching for sponges off the Greek island of Antiquity discovered something extraordinary in the wreckage of an ancient Roman shipwreck lying 45 meters beneath the surface. Among the scattered cargo of marble statues, bronze figures, and pottery shards, they found a corroded lump of bronze and wood, so encrusted with marine growth and corrosion that its nature was utterly unclear. It was brought to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, along with the other recovered objects, and there it sat, seemingly just another fragment from antiquity. But as the lump dried and began to crack apart, something remarkable was revealed. Inside were gears, dozens of precisely cut bronze gears, along with inscribed dials and plates covered with ancient Greek text. This was no ordinary artifact. This was some kind of mechanical device, a piece of technology from the ancient world, far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined possible. The Antiquity mechanism, as it came to be known, has been studied intensively for over a century, and only in recent decades, with the application of advanced imaging technologies, has its full nature been understood. It is an analog computer, constructed around 2,000 years ago, designed to calculate and predict the positions of celestial bodies with remarkable precision. It could predict eclipses, track the cycles of the moon, calculate the positions of planets, and even account for the irregular orbit of the moon, as described by Hipparchus, incorporating astronomical knowledge of extraordinary sophistication. The mechanism contains at least 30 bronze gears, possibly more that have been lost, arranged in complex gear trains that perform specific astronomical calculations. The precision of the gear cutting is remarkable, with teeth shaped to specific profiles to ensure smooth operation. The device would have been housed in a wooden case, with bronze dials on the front and back displaying various astronomical and calendrical information. The user would turn a crank on the side, and the gears would rotate the various dials, showing how the positions of celestial bodies changed over time. The inscriptions on the mechanism include an instruction manual of sorts, explaining how to interpret the various dials and what astronomical phenomena they represent. There are references to the Metonic cycle, the 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same days of the solar year. There are references to the Saros cycle used to predict eclipses. There are even indications that the mechanism included games schedules, showing when the various Pan-Hellenic games like the Olympics would be held. The discovery of the Antiquity mechanism revolutionized our understanding of ancient Greek technology. Before its discovery, scholars believed that ancient civilizations, while capable of impressive architecture and sophisticated philosophy, lacked complex mechanical technology. Geared mechanisms were thought to be a medieval innovation. The mechanism proved that ancient Greeks possessed not only the theoretical knowledge to understand complex astronomical relationships, but also the practical engineering skills to embody that knowledge in precise mechanical form. The mechanism also raised puzzling questions. Who built it? Where was it built? Why have no other similar devices survived? Was this a unique creation, or were such devices once common among educated Greeks? The device was likely built on the island of Rhodes, known for its astronomical expertise, possibly in the workshop of the great astronomer and mathematician Posidonius. The ship carrying it may have been transporting it to Rome, perhaps as a gift or treasure, when it sank around 65 BCE. The fact that this is the only such mechanism to have survived is not necessarily surprising. Bronze was valuable and was often melted down and reused, especially during times of economic hardship. Mechanical devices that fell out of use would have been prime candidates for recycling. The Antiquity mechanism survived only because it sank to the bottom of the sea, where it was preserved by the very forces that corroded it, almost beyond recognition. The mechanism reminds us of how much we have lost from the ancient world, how many achievements and capabilities have vanished, leaving barely a trace. We know from ancient texts that there were other complex devices. Archimedes was said to have created a planetarium. Heron of Alexandria described numerous mechanical devices, including early steam engines and automated theaters. Most of these devices are known only from descriptions. No physical examples survive. The Antiquity mechanism is a rare tangible connection to this lost world of ancient technology, a reminder that the people of the past were no less intelligent or capable than we are. They simply had different tools and a different knowledge base than we do. The device also speaks to the ancient Greek passion for understanding the cosmos. Astronomy was not merely practical, a way to track time and seasons, but was intimately connected to philosophy and theology. The movements of celestial bodies were thought to reflect divine order, and understanding those movements meant understanding something of the mind of the gods. The mechanism represents thousands of hours of observation, calculation, and craftsmanship, all in service of comprehending the rhythms of the heavens. From ancient technology, let us turn to a controversial map that, if authentic, would rewrite the history of European knowledge of the Americas. The Vinland Map is a world map drawn on vellum, allegedly dating from the mid-15th century, that shows a landmass labeled Vinland in the North Atlantic, west of Greenland. If genuine, it would be the first known map to depict part of the Americas and would provide documentary evidence for Norse exploration of North America before Columbus. The map first came to public attention in 1965, when it was acquired by Yale University and published with great fanfare. It shows Europe, Asia, and Africa in a manner consistent with 15th century cartographic knowledge, but it also shows Greenland and a large island to the west labeled Vinelanda Insula. A Latin inscription on the map describes how Norse explorers discovered this land and established a settlement there. This is not mere fiction. We know from Norse sagas and from archaeological evidence at Lanseog Meadows in Newfoundland that Vikings did indeed reach North America around 1000 CE, nearly 500 years before Columbus. The sagas describe a land of forests and wild grapes, which they called Vinland. The question is whether this map is a genuine pre-Columbian representation of that knowledge, or a modern forgery. The controversy over the Vinland Map has raged for decades, with experts on both sides presenting sophisticated arguments. Those who support its authenticity point to various features consistent with medieval map-making, to the wormholes in the vellum that line up with another medieval manuscript, with which the map was apparently once bound, and to various details that would have been difficult for a forger to know. Those who argue it is a forgery point to various cartographic oddities, to ink analysis that some claim shows the presence of titanium dioxide, a pigment not available in medieval times, and to features they consider anachronistic. The debate is further complicated by the fact that chemical analysis has given contradictory results depending on the testing method used. Some tests suggest the ink is modern, others suggest it could be medieval. The vellum itself appears to be genuinely medieval, but that does not preclude someone using old vellum to create a forgery in the 20th century. Carbon dating of the vellum places it in the correct medieval time frame, but again, this does not prove that the map drawn on it is medieval. What makes the Vinland Map so controversial is not just the technical questions about its age and authenticity, but what it would mean if it were genuine. It would demonstrate that knowledge of Norse discoveries in the Americas had spread beyond Scandinavia into the broader European cartographic tradition well before Columbus. It would show that the Norse achievement was not an isolated episode that was forgotten, but was known and documented, even if not widely publicized. Some scholars have suggested that even if the map is a modern creation, it may be based on a genuine medieval original that has since been lost. In this scenario, someone in the 20th century may have copied or reconstructed an authentic medieval map, creating something that is simultaneously genuine in its content, but modern in its execution. This would explain some of the contradictory evidence. The Vinland Map reminds us that historical evidence can be ambiguous, that not all questions have clear answers, and that our understanding of the past is always provisional, subject to revision as new evidence emerges, or as new analytical techniques allow us to examine old evidence in new ways. It also demonstrates the powerful allure of artifacts that challenge established narratives, that promise to overturn what we thought we knew. The debate over the map's authenticity continues, with new studies periodically claiming to settle the question one way or another, only to be challenged by subsequent research. Perhaps one day the matter will be definitively resolved. Until then, the Vinland Map exists in a state of uncertainty, both medieval and modern, both genuine and suspect, a reminder that the past is not always as clear as we might wish. Now let us journey to the deserts of the Middle East, to caves near the Dead Sea, where, between 1947 and 1956, Bedouin shepherds and archaeologists discovered perhaps the most significant collection of ancient religious texts ever found. The Dead Sea Scrolls comprise approximately 900 documents, including texts from the Hebrew Bible, sectarian manuscripts describing the beliefs and practices of an ancient Jewish community, and various other religious and secular writings. These texts, written mostly on parchment and papyrus, date from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE, making them 1,000 years older than any previously known biblical manuscripts. The discovery began almost by accident. In early 1947, a young Bedouin shepherd named Mohammed Edi Aj-Dib was searching for a lost goat among the caves that honeycombed the cliffs overlooking the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. Throwing a stone into one of the caves, he heard the sound of breaking pottery. Investigating, he found several clay jars containing leather scrolls wrapped in linen. Not recognizing their significance, he and his companions took the scrolls and eventually sold them to an antiquities dealer in Bethlehem. The scrolls made their way through various hands before scholars recognized what they were. One set was purchased by the Syrian Orthodox Archbishop of Jerusalem, another by a professor at Hebrew University. When the first scrolls were examined and translated, scholars realized they had discovered something extraordinary. These were not merely old texts, but ancient manuscripts that predated the earliest known copies of biblical books by a millennium. The impact on biblical scholarship would be profound and lasting. Over the following years, more caves were explored and more scrolls discovered. 11 caves in the vicinity of Qumran eventually yielded scroll fragments, with Cave 4 alone producing over 15,000 fragments representing hundreds of different texts. The process of assembling these fragments, many of them tiny pieces of deteriorated parchment, was like working on thousands of jigsaw puzzles simultaneously without knowing what pictures they were supposed to form. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls are copies of nearly every book of the Hebrew Bible, with the notable exception of the Book of Esther. These biblical manuscripts are remarkable for what they reveal about the transmission of biblical texts. Scholars had long wondered how accurately biblical texts had been copied and preserved over millennia. The Dead Sea Scrolls provided a way to check. When the ancient scrolls were compared with medieval manuscripts that had been the basis for modern translations, scholars found that the texts had been preserved with remarkable accuracy. The scribes who copied these texts, generation after generation, had done their work with extraordinary care and precision. But the scrolls also revealed variations, different versions of certain biblical books, that showed the text was not completely fixed in ancient times. There were differences in wording, sometimes substantial, between scrolls found in different caves. This provided insights into how the biblical canon developed, how certain versions of texts came to be accepted as authoritative while others fell out of use. Perhaps even more fascinating than the biblical manuscripts are the sectarian documents, texts that describe the beliefs and practices of the community that likely created and hid the scrolls. Most scholars believe this community was the Essenes, a Jewish sect known from ancient historical sources, but about whom little concrete was known until the scrolls were discovered. These documents reveal a community that had withdrawn from mainstream Jewish society, living a communal life dedicated to religious purity and the study of Scripture. They believed they were living in the end times, that a great battle between the forces of light and darkness was imminent, and that they were the true faithful remnant of Israel. The community rule, one of the sectarian texts, describes the organization and practices of this community. Members shared their possessions, participated in communal meals, followed strict purity regulations, and spent much of their time studying Scripture and composing new religious texts. The War Scroll describes an apocalyptic battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. The Pesher texts are commentaries on biblical books that interpret ancient prophecies as referring to contemporary events and figures, showing how the community understood themselves as living in prophetically significant times. The scrolls also include previously unknown texts, such as the Temple Scroll, which describes an idealized temple and its rituals in great detail, and then the Genesis Apocryphon, which retells and expands upon stories from Genesis. These texts show how Jewish communities in the late Second Temple period were actively engaged in interpreting, expanding, and reimagining their scriptural traditions. The impact of the Dead Sea Scrolls on our understanding of ancient Judaism and early Christianity has been profound. They provide a window into the diverse religious landscape of first-century Judaism, showing that there was not a single monolithic Judaism, but various groups with different beliefs and practices. This context helps us understand the emergence of Christianity, which began as a Jewish movement in this complex religious environment. The scrolls also shed light on the development of Jewish mysticism, messianic expectations, and interpretive traditions. They show connections between ideas that would later develop in Rabbinic Judaism and in early Christianity, revealing common roots and shared intellectual heritage. They have forced scholars to revise many assumptions about the development of biblical texts, Jewish theology, and the relationship between Judaism and Christianity in their formative periods. The story of the Dead Sea Scrolls also includes controversy and intrigue. For decades, a small team of scholars controlled access to the scrolls, delaying publication and preventing other researchers from studying them. This created frustration and conspiracy theories. In the 1990s, pressure from the scholarly community and the public finally forced the release of photographs of all the scroll fragments, opening them to broader study. The controversy highlighted important questions about scholarly access to important discoveries and the responsibilities of those entrusted with cultural treasures. Today, the scrolls are housed primarily in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, in a special climate-controlled building called the Shrine of the Book, designed to preserve these fragile texts for future generations. They continue to be studied using increasingly sophisticated technologies. Multispectral imaging can reveal text on fragments too darkened or damaged for the naked eye to read. DNA analysis of the parchment helps scholars understand which fragments came from the same original scroll. Digital databases allow scholars worldwide to study high-resolution images, democratizing access to these treasures. The Dead Sea Scrolls remind us that sometimes the most valuable artifacts are not made of precious materials, but of humble parchment and ink, that the greatest treasures can be words and ideas preserved across centuries. They connect us to the religious and intellectual world of our ancestors, allowing voices silenced 2 millennia ago to speak again, enriching our understanding of where we came from, and how the religious traditions that shape billions of lives today came to be. These scrolls were hidden in caves during a time of turmoil, possibly during the Jewish revolt against Rome in the 1st century CE. The community may have hidden them for safekeeping, hoping to return when the crisis passed. They never did. The scrolls remained hidden for nearly 2,000 years, waiting in darkness for a shepherd boy, throwing a stone to discover them again. In their long sleep, empires rose and fell, religions emerged and spread, languages evolved and changed, yet the scrolls endured, preserving words written in an ancient world that would have been completely lost without them. The deliberate hiding of texts to preserve them is a recurring theme in history. During the dissolution of monasteries in England under Henry VIII, some monks hid valuable manuscripts to save them from destruction. During World War II, librarians and curators hid artworks and books to protect them from bombing and looting. The impulse to preserve, to save for the future what is precious, is deeply human. The Dead Sea community, facing what they believed might be the end of their world, chose to hide their most sacred texts, and in doing so, gave an unintended gift to future generations. The future of antiquity. As we approach the end of our journey through history's most legendary artifacts, it is worth considering how our relationship with the past is changing in the present age, and what the future might hold for the study and appreciation of antiquity. We stand at a unique moment in human history, where new technologies are revolutionizing how we discover, study, preserve, and experience the artifacts and treasures of previous ages. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are opening new frontiers in archaeology and historical research. Algorithms can analyze satellite imagery to identify potential archaeological sites, detecting subtle variations in vegetation or soil that might indicate buried structures invisible to the human eye. In Egypt, such technology has helped identify numerous previously unknown pyramids and settlements buried beneath the sand. In Central America, it has revealed vast ancient Maya cities hidden beneath jungle canopy, transforming our understanding of the scale and complexity of pre-Columbian civilizations. These discoveries remind us that there is still so much we do not know, so many treasures still waiting to be found. Entire cities lie beneath our feet, covered by soil and vegetation, holding secrets about how people lived, what they believed, how they organized their societies. Each new discovery adds pieces to the great puzzle of human history, filling in gaps, answering old questions, raising new ones. Advanced imaging techniques allow us to read texts that were thought lost forever. The Herculaneum papyri, scrolls carbonized by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, were too fragile to unroll without disintegrating. For centuries they sat in museums, their contents forever sealed. Now, using X-ray phase contrast tomography and machine learning algorithms trained to recognize ink patterns, scholars can virtually unroll these scrolls and read their contents without physically touching them. Lost works of Greek and Roman literature may yet be recovered from what seemed like charred lumps of carbon. Multispectral imaging reveals text on palimpsests, manuscripts where earlier text was scraped off so the parchment could be reused. The famous Archimedes palimpsest, where a Byzantine prayer book was discovered to have been written over a copy of previously unknown works by Archimedes, yielded its secrets to multispectral imaging. The technique has been applied to countless manuscripts, revealing hidden layers of text and recovering lost works. Three-dimensional scanning and printing technologies are changing how we experience and study artifacts. Fragile objects can be precisely scanned, creating digital models that can be studied without risk of damage to the original. These models can be shared instantly with researchers worldwide, democratizing access to artifacts that previously could only be studied in person. Moreover, exact replicas can be printed, allowing museums to display copies while keeping originals in controlled storage, or enabling artifacts to be exhibited in multiple locations simultaneously. These technologies also offer new solutions to debates about cultural ownership. If a perfect replica can be created, indistinguishable from the original, except through scientific analysis, does it matter as much where the original resides? Museums could return original artifacts to their places of origin while retaining educational copies for their collections. Of course, this raises its own questions. Is there value in the original beyond its physical properties? Does authenticity matter when the visual and even tactile experience can be perfectly replicated? These are questions each culture and institution must answer for themselves. DNA analysis is revealing unexpected stories about ancient objects. The parchment used for manuscripts comes from animal skins, and DNA analysis can identify not only the species, but sometimes even the specific herd from which the animals came. This helps scholars understand trade networks, since parchment might travel far from where the animals were raised. It can also help authenticate objects or identify forgeries, since ancient parchment will have different DNA preservation characteristics than modern parchment artificially aged. Chemical analysis of pigments, inks, and materials continues to grow more sophisticated and less destructive. Techniques like X-ray fluorescence can identify elements present in tiny samples, or even without taking samples at all, helping to date objects, identify their origins, and detect forgeries. The Vinland Map controversy might eventually be settled definitively as analytical techniques improve and can provide clearer answers about the composition of its ink. Yet technology alone cannot answer the deeper questions about what we should do with the knowledge and artifacts from the past. As global consciousness of colonialism's legacies grows, museums and nations face increasingly urgent questions about the proper stewardship of cultural heritage. The British Museum, the Louvre, the Metropolitan Museum, and countless other institutions built their collections during the Age of Empire. Many objects in their collections were acquired under circumstances that would be considered unethical or illegal today. Should these objects be returned to their places of origin? If so, to whom exactly? Modern national boundaries often do not align with ancient cultural regions. Greece exists as a modern nation-state, but the ancient Greeks who created the Parthenon sculptures had no concept of a Greek nation in the modern sense. Egypt, as a modern country, is the successor to ancient Egypt, but the connection is complex, involving thousands of years and multiple cultural transformations. There are no simple answers to these questions. Some argue that major museums serve humanity as a whole, preserving and displaying treasures that might not receive proper care in their countries of origin, particularly in nations affected by political instability or lacking resources for conservation. Others counter that this paternalistic attitude echoes colonial justifications, assuming that Western institutions are better custodians than the cultures that created the objects. They argue that cultural heritage is not just about objects, but about the relationship between communities and their past, and that this relationship is damaged when artifacts are removed from their cultural context. The debate intensifies in cases where artifacts have clear religious or spiritual significance to living communities. Native American tribes have successfully argued for the return of sacred objects and human remains from museums, asserting that some things should not be on public display, regardless of their scientific or educational value. The argument extends beyond legal ownership to questions of respect, cultural autonomy, and the rights of living communities to control how their heritage is treated. International laws and ethical guidelines have evolved to address these issues. The UNESCO Conventions on Cultural Property attempt to prevent illicit trafficking in antiquities and encourage the return of cultural objects to their countries of origin. Many nations have strengthened their own laws protecting archaeological sites and restricting the export of cultural treasures. Museums increasingly scrutinize the provenance of potential acquisitions, refusing objects that lack clear documentation of legal excavation and export. Yet the illegal antiquities trade continues to flourish. War and political instability create opportunities for looting. The chaos in Iraq, following the 2003 invasion, saw the Baghdad Museum looted and countless archaeological sites across the country systematically excavated by looters. The Syrian civil war has resulted in massive destruction of heritage sites and widespread looting. Artifacts from these and other conflict zones find their way into international markets, purchased by collectors who may not know or may choose not to know their illicit origins. The rise of digital humanities is changing how we interact with historical knowledge. Vast databases catalog artifacts, texts, and archaeological findings, making information accessible to researchers and the public in ways never before possible. Online exhibitions allow people anywhere in the world to view collections they might never be able to visit in person. Virtual reality technologies promise even more immersive experiences, potentially allowing people to virtually walk through reconstructed ancient sites or to examine artifacts in 3 dimensions from any angle. This democratization of access has profound implications. Knowledge about the past is no longer limited to those who can afford to travel or attend elite universities. A student in a remote village with internet access can view the same high-resolution images of artifacts that scholars at major research institutions see. This levels the playing field in some ways, though significant inequalities remain in who has the training and resources to interpret and contribute to scholarly understanding. Social media has created new ways for people to engage with history and archaeology. Museums share images and stories from their collections, making cultural heritage part of daily digital life for millions of people. Crowdsourcing projects enlist the public in transcribing historical documents or analyzing archaeological data, turning passive consumers of history into active participants in creating historical knowledge. This engagement fosters a sense of connection to the past and investment in its preservation. Yet, the digital age also brings new threats. Climate change poses existential risks to countless archaeological sites and artifacts. Rising sea levels threaten coastal sites. Increasing temperatures affect the preservation of organic materials. More intense storms and floods cause physical damage. The urgency of documenting and studying sites before they are lost forever has never been greater. Digital preservation becomes not just an enhancement, but a necessity, creating records that will outlast the physical objects themselves in some cases. The question of why ancient artifacts and historical treasures continue to captivate us in the digital age is worth pondering. In a world where we can access virtually unlimited information instantly, where entertainment is ubiquitous and diverse, where we can see high-definition images of anything, why do people still queue for hours to view ancient objects in museums? Why do stories of lost treasures and archaeological discoveries still capture popular imagination? Perhaps it is because these objects represent something that cannot be replicated digitally, a tangible connection to real people who lived in ages vastly different from our own, yet who experienced joy and sorrow, hope and fear, love and loss just as we do. When we stand before an ancient sculpture or gaze at a medieval manuscript, we are in the presence of something those ancient people created, touched, valued. There is a sacred quality to this encounter, a bridging of the gulf of time that no digital representation, however perfect, can fully replicate. The artifacts we have explored in this journey, from diamonds that passed through the hands of emperors to scrolls that preserved ancient wisdom, from mechanisms of staggering sophistication to runes of luminous amber, from cursed tombs to contested marbles, all share this quality. They connect us to our collective human story, remind us of what humans have achieved and endured, challenge us to think about what we value and why, and invite us to see ourselves as part of a continuous chain of humanity, stretching from the deep past into an unknown future. In contemplating the future of antiquity, we must balance competing values: the desire to preserve against the need to study, the claims of nations and communities against the ideal of universal heritage, the drive to make knowledge accessible against the requirement to protect fragile objects, the wish to right historical wrongs against the complexity of doing so justly. There are no perfect solutions, only the ongoing negotiation of these tensions, guided hopefully by wisdom, empathy, and a genuine commitment to preserving the material witnesses of human history for generations yet to come. As technology advances, as our ethical understanding evolves, as the world changes in ways we cannot predict, our relationship with these legendary artifacts will continue to transform. But the fundamental human impulse that draws us to them, the desire to touch the past and to find meaning in the objects our ancestors created and treasured, is likely to endure as long as humans remain curious about where they came from and who they are. The legendary artifacts we have explored tonight are more than objects of beauty or value, more than museum pieces or historical curiosities. They are repositories of meaning, vessels of memory, bridges across time. They remind us that we are part of something larger than ourselves, inheritors of a vast and complex legacy, custodians for a time of treasures that will outlast us and speak to generations we will never meet. In this sense, every person who learns about these artifacts, who is moved by their stories, who thinks deeply about what they represent, becomes part of their ongoing story, another link in the chain connecting past to present to future. As we bring our journey through history's legendary artifacts to a gentle close, let your mind rest on the images we have explored together. The glittering facets of the Koh-i-Noor, reflecting centuries of bloodshed and empire. The dark surface of the Rosetta Stone, its 3 scripts the key that unlocked an entire civilization. The intricate bronze gears of the Antiquity mechanism, testament to ancient genius. The weathered scrolls from the caves of Qumran, preserving words written 2 millennia ago. The luminous panels of the Amber Room, lost but not forgotten. The marble sculptures from the Parthenon, at the center of ongoing debates about heritage and ownership. Each of these artifacts carries within it countless stories, layers of meaning accumulated over centuries or millennia. Each has been touched by human hands, valued by human hearts, fought over, preserved, studied, and wondered at. Each connects us to the great sweep of human history, to the ambitions and achievements, the conflicts and collaborations, the wisdom and folly of those who came before us. In the quiet of this moment, as sleep approaches, we can feel ourselves connected to that long chain of humanity, inheritors of all that has been preserved and remembered, responsible in our own time for what we choose to value and protect, soon to become ourselves part of the past that future generations will study and wonder about. The artifacts endure, silent witnesses, carrying forward the legacy of human creativity and longing, waiting patiently to share their stories with anyone who takes the time to listen. Let these thoughts drift through your mind like clouds across a peaceful sky, requiring no effort, no analysis, just gentle contemplation as consciousness begins to fade. History's legendary treasures have shared their secrets with us tonight, and now we can rest, secure in the knowledge that the great human story continues. That beauty and meaning persist across the ages, that we are part of something ancient and ongoing, something precious and profound. Rest now, and let the wonders of the past guide you gently into peaceful sleep, knowing that tomorrow is another day to explore, to learn, to connect with the vast tapestry of human experience that these legendary artifacts represent. The treasures will still be there, waiting patiently as they have waited for centuries, ready to share their stories again when you are ready to listen. For now, simply rest and let the gentle flow of history carry you softly into dreams, where ancient emperors and modern curators, lost civilizations and future generations, all exist together in the timeless realm of memory and imagination. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the wonder and mystery of humanity's greatest treasures.